Good morning. I expect crap for dancers. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, hi, my name's Dan. Thank you, Anita, for the introduction. It's great to be here and to come and talk to a lot of athletes and athlete coaches like yourselves. I jump around for a living, much like you guys, but probably less gracefully, I suspect, and probably fall over a lot more. But to explain parkour and a little bit about what I do first, I'm going to show a video which is going to probably explain it a lot more eloquently.
Parkour is about facing difficult situations and putting yourself in situations where you have to adapt and actually change to overcome them.
We develop around our body being able to move. You know, I think moving helps us reach that natural level of unity, that we reach that balance in our body.
And it's just natural, it's natural movement, it's just using your own body, you know.
And it's quite rare to find a sport where your challenge is as much mentally as physically. So the biggest thing about parkour for me is that you're actually getting to work your mind, face your fears, and grow from a mental perspective as well as a physical one.
I wouldn't say parkour itself is a life philosophy, but what it inspires is pretty much self-improvement, and that's the kind of philosophy I take away.
Okay, so do you want the good news or the bad news? Good news. Okay, the good news is you're not going to die today, probably. Do you want the bad news? Yeah. You're going to die. You're all going to die, okay? We're all going to die. Why am I saying that to start with? It's a bit weird, a bit morbid maybe, this time in the morning. But it kind of sets the tone because there's generally a culture nowadays, certainly in our industrialized societies, of trying to convince us that we're basically going to live forever. And that if we just don't do anything out of our comfort zone or step outside of the box or take this risk or take that risk, then we'll survive. And surviving is somehow really important to survive as long as possible. But obviously, hopefully you guys agree that surviving isn't that important. Living is really important. And I'm sure if you dance, that's one of the key expressions you make. So it's good to understand that, the end of the day, you are going to die. We are going to end. So the most dangerous thing of all, the biggest risk, the risk of death or whatever, you may as well get used to that because it's not a risk, it's a certainty. So once you've got that in your head, you can kind of think, okay, right. So that's the worst that can happen. So I may as well actually try and live and start living. So, and that's what we do in parkour. It's very much an element of what we do. Is to seek, not seek danger, but to seek things that are going to help us grow and help us live, help us experience the moment. And that normally entails some sort of risk-taking, some sort of going outside of your comfort zone, going outside of what you know. And that innovation requires risk. To be able to innovate, to be able to do something new, means letting go of the old and stepping away from that, which is taking a risk. So I was asked here to talk about pushing physical boundaries and kind of open this up for the day. I'm not going to go into the details of things like injury prevention or injury management or all that sort of stuff, because all the speakers today are going to do that amazingly well, so I don't really need to do that. What I'm going to talk about is a little bit more conceptual and just try and get us thinking in a different way about taking risks and maybe a different way about injury itself. It's probably no accident that Dance UK got in touch with us and said, we want to talk about this kind of stuff, and you guys probably get injured all the time, so come and talk about it. And we do get injured. Obviously, we're professional athletes, and we live a very physical lifestyle, and every now and again we do get injured. Who here has been injured in their career? Okay, probably everyone's hand goes up. If your hand doesn't go up, you're in the wrong place, because it means you have not been doing any physical thing in your life. If you undertake any physical activity for any length of time, you're going to get injured. Okay, it's the way it is. That's fine. That's fine, as we're going to see. That is fine. So parkour is a discipline about sort of challenge, exploration, and adaptation. You've probably all seen it in movies and everywhere now. And it's very much an autotelic discipline. By that I mean it's self-purposed. So we don't have competitions, things like that. We aren't judged, but we will find our own purpose, and then we'll find a way to achieve it. So we'll find a jump or a challenge or a movement, and then we'll train towards achieving it, and we'll achieve it, and that's it. So we find the purpose and we go towards it. That's what autotelic means. It just means self-purposed, really self-driven. So because of that, there's a huge element of self-responsibility in what we do. We take responsibility for our actions always, and if we do get hurt or get injured, then we accept that as part of the journey, as part of what we chose to do, as part of this choosing life, really, choosing risk, rather than, geez, I sound like train spotting, choosing risk to keep going forwards. As part of what we do, we accept that responsibility, and in that we try to discover our potential. Certainly when I came to parkour, that's what I found. I've been doing martial arts, fighting disciplines since I was very young, and had become very confident in that area. So I was no longer really tested or pushed. So I think I got to the stage where I wasn't really afraid of what I was doing anymore, and I was very confident at it. And then the first time I tried parkour about 12 years ago, when it was tiny, about 50 people in the world knew about it back then. The first jump I did, kind of out training. I was living in Japan at the moment, out training with a friend. Neither of us knew what we were doing. Found a jump that kind of looked interesting between two walls. It was about 20 foot up. So if he'd fallen, probably would have broken something, I guess. But I could see that I could easily do it physically. But mentally, it really scared me, obviously. And I hadn't felt fear for a long time. So that really engaged me. I thought, well, this is amazing. I haven't been afraid like this for a long time. So I wanted to do it, and jumped and managed to do it. We generally don't coach like that nowadays, but we sort of get up there and jump and good luck. Sometimes, but no, not all the time. So we don't encourage that, but that's how I started. That's how a lot of us started back then. And what it made me realize climbing up from that jump was, wow. I mean, I had no idea my potential. I had no idea I was capable of that sort of thing, physically or mentally. So then I started to research and go into it and find the founding practitioners from France and train with them. And what I realized when I started training with them especially was that I used to think I was sort of strong, fit, capable, and that sort of stuff. Had good balance, good spatial awareness and all this through martial arts. But when I saw what they were doing, I realized that I was a complete beginner, a complete novice in physical terms. They were 100 times stronger than I was, 100 times quicker, 100 times more fearless, much better balance. Could do things I wouldn't even have thought were humanly possible until I saw them do it. So I realized that my boundaries were quite limited, and their boundaries were really expansive. So what they were doing wasn't dangerous. It had risks, but it wasn't dangerous because they knew how to do it. They were in control of what they were doing, which is obviously the difference between risk and danger. So they just expanded their boundaries a lot, and I wanted to do that. So I kept training with them and sort of achieve the same level. That was really eye-opening for me, and made me think about things completely differently. And then I began to understand the consequences of not pushing those boundaries, consequences of trying to do that versus not trying to do it. There are consequences to pushing boundaries. Okay, there are consequences to risk, in that sometimes risk by definition means sometimes you're not going to do it, you're not going to make it. The least sort of bad risk could be that you just embarrass yourself in some way or don't make it. You think, well, I'll try tomorrow, don't quite make it. Obviously the worst or the higher end of consequences are you get hurt, you get injured, or maybe you die, which obviously we're trying to avoid. But there are consequences to what you're doing, consequences to taking these risks. But the consequences of not trying to take them, for me, I realized were much higher. In that then I would achieve nothing. I wouldn't understand my potential. I wouldn't reach my limits. I wouldn't live. So I'd maybe survive for a bit longer in a nice sort of cotton wool way, but eventually I'm going to die, and then what? So I haven't learned anything, I haven't really experienced anything, I haven't seen what I could do. So for me, the consequences of not trying were worse than the consequences of trying. So that's why I began to try, take those risks. So we learned to embrace risk and fear. Okay, we realized that innovation requires risk. We embrace it, we try to move towards it, and we try to understand that you can manage it through healthy training and through healthy outlook on life, okay? And to get away from this sort of let's avoid all risk mindset. A good friend of mine, the Professor David Ball, who's the first Professor of Risk in the UK. He was, it's an amazing title. He came up with this idea that we shouldn't have risk assessments. I'm sure all of you guys do risk assessments to the nth degree. We shouldn't do risk assessments. We should do risk-benefit assessments. Some of you may have heard that term, and it was changed that term in some fields, which is really good because it gets across the idea that, yeah, there are some risks, but the benefits of that risk are high enough that you should take the risk and you should allow them to take the risk. Yeah. So it's kind of an equation of risk versus benefit, rather than just saying, what's the risk? Oh my God, we can't do it, it's too risky. Because then you'd never do anything, right? Because pretty much everything's risky. So I really like that approach, and that it kind of informs our training and our coaching and all the certifications when we run certifications for people to coach what we do. That's an important part of it. Those are some graphs. You have to have graphs in a PowerPoint. They don't mean anything, okay? But if you don't, my maths teacher told me long ago, if you do a PowerPoint and there's no graphs in it, it's really not a good PowerPoint. So there we go. They don't mean anything. Don't take any note of that bit. And if that bit's in your pack, then, you know, throw it away. However, that does, what are you going to say about risk, however you're going to justify it, and you guys all justify it because you're athletes. You know, you understand that there are risks to what you do. However you justify the risk, at some stage you're going to get injured. Okay, at some stage you're going to push that boundary too much because you want to, and at some stage it's going to come back and bite you in the ass, basically. But what is injury? I think it's very important to think about what is injury. We give it such a negative connotation, the word injury. It's immediately seen as a negative thing. But what is it really? Okay, obviously there are overuse injuries and there are acute injuries, roughly divided into those two categories. And they can overlap, one can cause the other, etc., etc. But what is it? All it is really, all injury is really, is feedback. Okay, that's all it is. It's just feedback from what you've done. You do something, if you get injured as a result of it, it's just feedback that you have done something not as well as you could have. Yeah? Or you've been your training method is poor and therefore you developed an overuse injury, or whatever. And that feedback is, if we see it that way, we stop seeing it negatively, we start seeing it actually as something that maybe has something for us to learn. So maybe it's actually a gift being injured, because it normally shows you the thing you need to learn the most in your discipline. If you get injured, it normally points out the thing you are doing wrong the most. And it might not be a physical thing. That's an important thing to realize. It may not be that your training method is wrong. Maybe your physical training program is great. But it might be that your mental approach is not quite right. Either you're pushing yourself too hard and you're trying to progress too quickly, or you're simply not balanced mentally at the time. So you may be upset or angry, or trying to impress your friends or something like that, and do something that isn't quite within your reach, and you get hurt. So that feedback, you should just understand what that is telling you. You should understand that it's not, okay, my training, if it's, for example, you were trying to impress your friends, it's maybe not that your training method was wrong. It's that, okay, there's something wrong with my mentality. My ego got me injured there. And that's really, really important, because in my experience of training and coaching for 10, 12 years now in parkour, most of the injuries that happen, which are actually quite few statistically if you want to go into the stats, but forget the stats. Most of the injuries that happen, if you then ask the person to go into a little bit of detail about what they've been doing for the day before or the week before, or what's going on in their life, there'll normally be something going on isn't quite right. And they'll say, yeah, I had a really bad day today, or, you know, yeah, my girlfriend left me, my house burned down, my car blew up, yeah, you know. And in that case, maybe they shouldn't have been training, because mentally they weren't balanced. And we really understand this the ancient Greek ideal of a healthy mind and a healthy body. We kind of see how important that is. Because it doesn't matter how fit and strong you are, if your mind isn't there, if you're not balanced mentally, it's not going to work. Something is going to go wrong. Okay, so we see everything in a very holistic sense. We understand that you have to train yourself physically as much as you train mentally. You must train mentally as much as you train physically, and try to find a balance. So if you find a good balance, a healthy approach to your training, so you're not driven by ego, you learn when to rest, you learn to take your time, you learn to progress at your level, then you'll be okay. Generally, people like that, they don't get injured very much. They'll progress for years and years and years in very high-risk disciplines and never be very injured. And then you get people that train in low-risk disciplines who get hurt all the time. And it may be just to do with their mentality. So that balance is really everything for us. And we think you've got to train the whole. Okay, you have to train the whole of yourself as a being. Whole, the etymology of the word whole is the same as health. Okay, health, if you trace it back, just comes from the Old English word whole. So to be healthy means you must be a whole individual. Okay, mentally, physically, spiritually, however you want to see it. But you've got to train that whole. You must train it as a package. If you do that, much less likely to get injured, in my experience. So, also if you do that, you're able then to engage with risk. Okay, because you're kind of centered enough to look at something and think, this is risky, yes, but I can manage it. I have the skill, the ability to manage it. I know I'm kind of ready. Physically and mentally, I'm at that stage where I can take this risk. So I'm going to go for it. So you become kind of risk confident. Yeah. Not risk averse. You become risk confident. And then you're actually, that makes you safer. Okay. Doesn't make you more dangerous. This whole view that people that take crazy risks, the extreme sports and all that, as they're called, high risk, actually they're not. They're really not. Because those people are not, most of those practitioners are not adrenaline junkies. We're not adrenaline junkies at all. If we have lots of adrenaline coursing through us, then we can't pull off fine motor skills. And if my fine motor skills go out the window at 100 feet in the air, it's not going to be good. So we don't really like to have adrenaline flowing through us. We have to be quite calm and meditative when we move. Probably the same as dance. So all we are is risk confident. We're just aware that we can do this. Yeah. We're very good at making the calculations, and then we do it. So very few people ever get injured in parkour at high levels, for example, when you stuff you see in the movies and the videos, when we jump between buildings, etc. Very, very rarely does that get anyone hurt amongst the real practitioners, because they know they can do it. They're 100% sure they can do that. I'm 99.9% sure. Most of the injuries happen at ground level when people are trying stuff they're not sure about, or they're not concentrating, or something else is out of balance, out of whack in their mind body. So be risk confident, find your balance. Generally, that way, you're going to be okay. But you have to also understand that no matter how balanced you are, no matter how good you are, at some stage, you're probably going to get that feedback. You're probably going to try something that you weren't quite ready for, or something that was just beyond you, and you might get a little bit injured. Yeah? Or you might be pushing your body so hard from the training you're doing as an athlete for so many years that eventually something wears out. Okay? And that's just feedback. That just teaches you, okay, now I have to change my training method. I have to adapt to that. I have to look at what caused that. So just see it as feedback. Yeah? Once you start doing that, you stop to see it as a negative thing, and you start to engage with it as actually a positive thing. You start to see injury as kind of a blessing, kind of having a lesson for you. And that, great, this is going to teach me something. I need to know this. And I can overcome it and adapt. The human body is amazing. You can overcome almost any injury. I'll adapt to that. I'll deal with that. And I'll learn. I'll take that message from it. And I'll be better for it at the end. And I think that's the aim of all athletes, is just to keep improving. Self-knowledge, self-improvement. And the knowledge you're going to get from everyone today, throughout the course of the day, I think is really good. I'm going to hang around for that, because the information looks amazing. And all that stuff is really important, all the detail that you can go into in terms of good nutrition, good training programs, lots of rest, how to have active recovery, all this kind of stuff that athletes need to know and need to coach. Really, really important. But let's try and keep it in the framework of feedback. Yeah, don't see it as so much as a negative thing. Let's try and understand that everything we do just gives us feedback. And that way around, probably engage with it more healthily. So thank you very much. I've been Dan Edwards, and I'll be around for the rest of the day. So if any of you do want to have any talk about parkour craziness or how to jump off buildings, then come and see me, and we'll talk later. So thank you very much.